Today I'm with Bob Kerr. Hello Bob, how are you?
Hi Myrddyn, I'm good. Yourself?
I'm okay, thank you very much. And today we're going to explore Bob's ascent of Kilimanjaro. Now, this is going to be the first video of 7 or 8 concerning the 7 summits, the highest point on each of the Earth's continents. Now, Bob, if we can lay a little bit about the background of why you decided to go out to Kilimanjaro.
Yeah. Kilimanjaro was very much the idea of some of my friends in the Ascent Mountain Rescue Team. I just returned from Greenland and we had a few beers after a training exercise, round a nice campfire, and it was suggested that a couple of them were heading out to Kilimanjaro in January, 6 months' time, and I was asked whether I'd want to go along, and I just sort of thought, why not?
Now, as far as the preparation concerning the trip, Bob, we will investigate that shortly, but what may be quite nice is to lay a little bit of factual detail about the hill itself.
Yeah.
So, where is Kilimanjaro?
Kilimanjaro is the highest mountain in Africa. It's located just south of the equator. I think it's about 250 miles south of the equator. And it used to be in the country of Kenya, but it's now in Tanzania, because Queen Victoria gave a birthday present to her grandson, Prince Wilhelm, of Kilimanjaro in 1886. So it moved countries from Kenya down to Tanganyika, which is now modern-day Tanzania. And
its height?
The mountain itself, excuse me for looking at a few crib notes, is 5,895 metres high, which in good old imperial measurements is 19,341 feet. So a fairly impressive height.
And of course its elevation from the plains below, what is that?
The elevation from the plains below is about 5,100 metres, so it's a very prominent mountain. And a good one to get done.
And concerning its first ascent, when was that?
The first ascent was done back in 1889, so not long after it was handed over to Tanganyika. Tanganyika was part of German territory, and there was quite a lot of early exploration done by the Germans.
Now, I believe when Westerners first heard about Kilimanjaro, they couldn't believe that there were glaciers and snow so close to the equator, but those glaciers are quickly reducing, aren't they?
Yeah, in the early exploration, folk just couldn't believe there was snow at the equator. These folk must be drunk or something. But yes, there is snow at the equator, and it is very rapidly receding. When the mountain was first climbed and surveyed, the glaciers were down to about 4,000 metres in altitude, and now there's only a little bit of the glaciers left in the upper reaches of the mountain. It's very surprising looking at photographs just how quickly the glaciers have receded.
Well, that's a little bit of fact about the mountain itself. Now, if we come on to the preparation before you went out, what did that entail and how long did that take?
I signed up for the expedition about 6 months before we were flying out, so I only had 6 months prep time, and I'd never been to that sort of altitude before, so I knew I had to get really fit. So when I came back from Greenland, I only had 46 Munros left to do. So before going out to Africa, I finished the Munros, 46 Munros in about 5 months, which isn't too bad going, including the Fisherfield 6 at the time. It's now Fisherfield 5. In terms of general preparation, I had to sort of look into permit, visa requirements, what vaccinations do we need. So I had to get vaccinated for things like yellow fever, diphtheria, typhoid, tetanus, had to have polio boosters, and just a good medical checkup. But I also had to speak with my doctor about altitude, because I'd never been to any significant height before, and it's all the mental preparation for being at altitude, because the highest I'd been to before was just over 2,200 metres in Norway.
That's quite a drastic step up, isn't it, compared to what you did in Norway, compared to the summit of Kilimanjaro?
Yeah, it was quite a step up. Sorry, I'd forgotten. I'd been to Greenland as well, 3,693 metres high. So, it's still another 2,000 metres height gain, and it is very much entering the unknown in altitude. Everybody responds differently to altitude, and every time at altitude can be different. So it's a big psychological unknown. What am I entering into here?
Now, what about the people that you went out with?
I went out with 3 friends from the Ascent Mountain Rescue Team. The main instigator was Mark Campbell, who was one of the deputy team leaders of the time, and his best friend Chris Warwick, who's an ambulance paramedic, and a good friend from my workplace at the time, Dounreay, a guy called Doug Graham.
Now, of course, the time that you went, how many years ago would it have been now?
It's 7 years ago since we were there. It's amazing how the time flies.
So what year would that have been?
I was 26 when I summited Kilimanjaro.
And the year?
That was 2005.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of detail about the preparation. Now, what about the journey out there?
Yeah, the journey out there, we'd booked with KLM, and we flew out of Edinburgh. Just like all good mountaineering expeditions, we had a little bit of lubrication in Edinburgh beforehand with a good friend, Ken Keith, who had a flat in Morningside. So we had a bit of lubrication and went to the airport. The day we were flying out was Chris Warwick's birthday, so he spent his birthday flying hungover. So a good start to the trip. So we flew from Edinburgh down to Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam area, and then it was a direct flight from there down to Kilimanjaro International Airport. I always remember sitting at Schiphol Airport with Mark and Chris waiting on the flight, and they were very big connoisseurs of prophylaxis and drug taking, and we were sitting there in Amsterdam Airport with them pill popping. So, interesting photographs in Amsterdam before we then flew down.
What time of year would this be?
We flew down in January, so it was just a few days after New Year, and it was only 2 or 3 weeks after I'd finished my Munros, and this was the first hill I was going to do after finishing the Munros.
Is this the normal climbing and trekking season on the Kilimanjaro that time of year?
You can climb Kilimanjaro pretty much year round because it's an equatorial mountain, but in January it's sometimes cloudy, but there's not too much rain. It's not the main rainy season, so it's a good time to go.
So we've now arrived at Kilimanjaro International Airport.
Yeah.
Now, what about the days leading up to when you started? You'll have to excuse me just for a moment. There's a fly on the screen. That's gone. Yeah. Sorry about that, Bob. Now, you've landed at Kilimanjaro International Airport. Mm-hmm. What about the days leading up to when you first started hiking up the mountain?
Well, once we arrived at Kilimanjaro International, we got picked up there and transferred over to a hotel in Moshi, which is nearby. And we just got acclimatised to the heat. This was my first time ever in Africa, and boy was it warm compared to Scotland in winter. So we had a day just getting used to the heat and having some Kilimanjaro beer or Tusker beer, or just keeping lubricated. You need to be well hydrated on these trips. And we then met our guides and his assistant guide at the hotel, and just generally got prepared for the following day to then start our ascent.
Is it compulsory to have guides?
Most people use guides and porters on the mountain because it helps sustain the local economy. It really helps bring in an income for the locals. I think it probably is compulsory to have some local support to help get you a permit. some folk may say it's compulsory, but I know some folk that have probably just sneaked up.
So is there, I know there's, I think, 6 normal routes, I believe, going up to Kaibo, the central peak. But what route did you take?
Yeah, we took the Umbwe route. We selected that route because it's not climbed by that many people, so it's quite a quiet route, and there's a little bit of scrambling involved on it on the second day. And by going up the Umbwe route, we then join some of the other routes at Barranco Camp, and then we continued upwards from there to Lava Tower, and then onwards to Arrow Glacier, where we stayed, and then we had the pleasure of going up through the Western Breach, which not that many people do on the main tourist routes.
So how many days would the ascent have taken you?
In total we took 6 days for the ascent. Because we hadn't done any acclimatisation peaks, a lot of people go off to do neighbouring peaks to get acclimatisation. We just acclimatised on the mountain. So the first day we arrived at the Umbwe Gate at about 1,500 metres or so, and trekked through the rainforest and camped in the rainforest at 2,200, 2,500 metres, something like that altitude, and then continued up.
And you mentioned the rainforest, Bob. I know that Kilimanjaro has some unique vegetation and quite diverse, quite a lot of biodiversity, isn't it? Mm-hmm. What is that actually like?
It makes the mountaineering really interesting, because you've got 5 different vegetation zones on the mountain, so just about every day on the mountain you're seeing something different, so it's something different to photograph and something different to talk about, and it's just amazing sort of seeing the low-lying savanna and trees as you drive up to Kilimanjaro, then the rainforest, and you've got the giant heathery type shrubs higher up, and then gets into a more arid environment with plants more used to arid environments, and then you get up into snow and rock zones with the glaciers. So
were you keeping a track of either the daily mileage, or was it more so the time that it took each day?
We took some notes as we went along, but it was a case of this is what the guides recommended. They kept telling us to go pole, pole, which means in Swahili, slowly, slowly. 4 guys from Mountain Rescue just wanting to rush up the hill, but for being at altitude you do need to go slow, give your body a chance.
Was the overnight accommodation hut based, or was it camping as well?
We were camping all the time.
Are there huts on the route that you took though?
I don't think there's any huts on the route we took up, but there's huts on some of the other routes.
Yeah. Were there other groups with you whilst on the ascent, on the same route?
There was no other groups on the Umbwe route for that section up to Barranco, but there was some other groups on the mountain who we met at Barranco Camp and up at Lava Tower, and also at Arrow Glacier. So
once you're beyond the rainforest, what kind of elevation are you at now?
Once you're out of the rainforest, you're can't remember the exact numbers, but 3,500 metres or so, and you're then entering this sort of giant heather vegetation zone with sort of very sort of mossy forestry. It's very interesting scenery.
So you're now coming up to heights that are beyond the ones that you experienced in Greenland?
Yes, that's right. The second day on Kilimanjaro I breached my previous altitude record, and that night we camped up at Barranco Camp, which is about 3,900 metres I guess, and I was completely in unknown territory.
How did you acclimatise, Bob? Did you take to it quite well?
I seemed to acclimatise pretty well. On the ascent of Kilimanjaro, on the recommendations of my friends, I was taking Diamox prophylactically, but I now know that it doesn't agree with me too well, and I haven't really used it since, so I've had cleaner ascents of other mountains, not drug assisted.
Now, you mentioned before when you gave the rough outline of the ascent route, that beyond the rainforest it became more arid, but there was also time higher on the mountain, I believe, for a slight acclimatisation trip to go do a little bit of scrambling?
Yeah, we, as part of the acclimatisation, we went from the Barranco camp up the Barranco wall, which on some of the sort of more tourist runs up Kilimanjaro, it seemed to be the really hard technical bit. We ran up it and back down and then had lunch.
Now, as far as the snow and the glaciers, did you encounter any of that before the crater rim?
Because we were going up the Western Breach route, as soon as we got to Arrow Glacier Camp, there was some snow and ice there, and for a couple of sections going up the Western Breach, we used our ice axe and crampons. So that was quite nice. The Arrow Glacier is just a very thin sliver of glacier that comes down.
And what day would that have been on the ascent?
That would have been the 6th day of the ascent. It only took us 6 days in total.
Oh, did it? God. So what about the summit day itself, Bob? What camp were you at and what elevation did you set off?
We set off from Arrow Glacier Camp, which is about 4,900 metres, I'm guessing. And for quite a while nobody's been allowed to camp there, because a year after we stayed there, there was a big rockfall which wiped out a number of Westerners and guides. So it's quite loose, unstable above there. So anyway, we set off from there early in the morning, but not too early. We wanted to see the Western Breach, so we didn't go for your typical sunrise on Kilimanjaro. We wanted to see the Western Breach, and halfway up the Western Breach the sun rose, and we could see the shadow of Kilimanjaro over the plains of Africa. And that way we could really see the glacier and appreciate the mountain. Then we got up to the crater rim and continued up towards the summit.
So how many people were with you, sort of friends and guides on the day of on the summit day?
There was 4 of us from the Ascent Mountain Rescue team, plus we had 2 assistant guides with us. The guide didn't summit with us. The guide had altitude sickness.
Now, I know some of the routes leading up to the crater rim on Kaibo. Many people just stop on the crater rim and then descend and not necessarily go to the highest point. Mm-hmm. Now, the name of the highest point is?
Uru Peak, if that's how you pronounce it.
So obviously you went to that.
Well, we were quite committed to going there, because as we went up over the Western Breach, all of our tents and equipment was being taken around the Barranco route to the Weepy route, if that's how you pronounce it. So we had to go over the mountain to get down to our kit. And halfway through the day I realised, my passport's in my bag that's been carried by the porters around the mountain.
So as far as the ascent route that took you up onto the crater rim, how far around the crater did you then have to walk to get to the highest point?
Can't remember the distances. It was you tend to work more in time.
So time-wise, how long did that take?
It was probably a couple of hours, but time just flies by when you're at altitude.
And the thrill of reaching the summit?
Oh, it was just amazing being on the roof of Africa and the views all around. It was great to actually achieve it.
How did you find it physically, that day all the way up to the summit, okay? Or?
Yeah, I was cruising at the top of it, and I'd assisted one of my colleagues putting on his crampons to get up the final snow slopes because he was struggling a wee bit. But that made me feel better, because I was able to compare myself relatively to somebody else who was struggling a little more.
How long did you spend on the summit?
Probably spent half an hour to an hour just enjoying the sunshine and taking loads of photos with Scottish flags, and yeah, just dominating the big Uru Peak sign.
Now, what we may do with this video is attempt to splice in some photos, but we'll discuss that, Bob. But we may try it. So whilst viewing this, the people may see some of your photos, which I've seen, and they're absolutely beautiful. Now, leaving the summit, you came. Your descent route was a different route, wasn't it?
Yeah, we descended down the Myrddyn route, if that's how you pronounce it, straight down the mountain. We descended down to a camp at 4,000 metres, and though you're not meant to be able to, we actually bought some beer there, and the four of us were drinking beer at 4,000 metres on altitude, on the mountain, having summited. And at that point, we were meant to stay at that camp. We decided, nah, let's keep going. Let's go to the pub. So we descended the rest of the way down the mountain, 4,400 metres of descent.
Wow! And that's still the summit day, isn't it?
Yeah,
that you did that.
Day. Yeah, summit day. We were in the pub at 7 p.m.
That's pretty extraordinary, really. So that's Kilimanjaro, the ascent and the descent, and no doubt, fantastic achievement to do that. It must be an incredible experience. But as far as coming back home, Bob, what happened then?
Well, coming back home, because we were off the mountain a day early, we had a spare day. So we had a chat with our guide, and he organised a one-day safari for us in Africa. So we went round the Arusha National Park, and we saw giraffes and colobus monkeys and all kinds of wildlife. And so at the end of that day, we'd done Kilimanjaro, we'd done a safari, we've done Africa, haven't we? So time to fly home. So we flew back.
Did you end up in hospital when you came back home?
Yeah, there was a little issue when I came home. When I returned home, I had quite a high fever and other symptoms, which my doctor was thinking was malaria. I'd been bitten a lot by mosquitoes out there. I've got some really impressive, scary photos of mosquito bites, and so I was admitted to hospital with suspected malaria. And I went to Wick Hospital, where they can't do blood tests for malaria. They have to send all the bloods down to Inverness. So I ended up spending 10 days in isolation in Wick Hospital because they didn't know what I had.
And what were the other sort of illnesses or diseases that they thought that you did have?
After ruling out malaria, after 2 or 3 days, I started breaking out in some pox marks. And they initially thought, that's chicken pox. Test me for chicken pox, negative. Oh, what is it then? And so they started testing me for loads of bizarre things. Smallpox, monkeypox, filariasis, all sorts. But the illness which most of my friends seem to keep jumping on is they thought I might have monkeypox. They kept saying, what was I doing with the monkeys in the jungle? But in the end, it was just an African strain of chickenpox, and all was fine. I'd never had chickenpox before.
So all well and healthy once that cleared up.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, it's been fascinating meeting you today and leading us to Tanzania and up Kilimanjaro, and that is the first of 6 of the continental summits that you've already done.
Yeah.
And of course, there's one more to go. But what we hope to do is have a series of videos on each.
Yes.
So, Bob, many, many thanks.
Yep, pleasure.